Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we'd like to welcome you on this session on mainstreaming Nepal's NDC into national plan, policies, regulations, and budgeting process and opportunity in NDC 3.0. This program, jointly organized by Ministry of Energy, Water Resource and Irrigation, Government of Nepal, with International Water Management Institute, IMI, and NDC Partnership Support Unit. So basically, we already came through the NDC, first NDC, second NDC, and we are in the process for developing the third NDC 3. So we are expecting that through this session, we will be highlighting the importance of NDC and in its role on integrating on the national plan and policy and regulations of at the country level. So basically, we'll have two major sessions. We'll have one presentation on setting the context of this program, and then that will be followed by a panel discussions. We have a team of 4 experts who will be delivering their ideas and experience on the context that will be set by these programs. I'm Tikaram Baral. I am the Joint Secretary at the Ministry of Energy, Water Resources and Irrigation in the Government of Nepal. So on behalf of the Ministry and the other organizing committee, including IMI, we would like to welcome you on this program. With this, I think I would like to request Mr. Susheel Chandra Acharya, who is the Joint Secretary at the Ministry of Energy, Water Resources and Irrigation, leading the climate unit in the Ministry, to deliver his presentations on the issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Tika. Good afternoon to all, and I would like to welcome you all. My presentation covered policy, policy, regulation, and budgeting processes, and opportunity. Thank you. An opportunity, we are drafting the NDC 3, an opportunity to include especially water and energy sectors. And we all know that Nepal is very vulnerable in the context of the climate change because of the mountainous terrains, steep topography, and young geology, mountain. More than 80% of the country area is covered by the mountains. And high intensity of the rainfall, monsoon-dominated region, unplanned settlement, and lack of the resilience infrastructures. Because as per our study, Nepal ranks in terms of vulnerability within the 10th, and in terms of the flood damage vulnerability, study categorized Nepal within the 4. So climate and disaster risks are expected to further increase because of the vulnerable situations affecting people, economy, and environment, and developing our putting the great risks in our development efforts. In a model study show that in the coming days, Nepal's climate change scenario, the days will be going to be more hotter, and intensity of the rainfall and intensity of the rainfall will be high in a short durations. And because of these vulnerable situations and the climate change scenario, the major impact will be in the water resources. The source of the water resources is Nepal, is Himalaya. Himalaya also called water towers. The glacier accumulation in the Himalaya is going to decline, and snow line is because of the temperature rise and other indicators of the climate change. Snow line are shifting upwards. So. In the last 3 decades, in a study show that 25% of the glaciers are declined. And extreme events, because of this temperature rise and other indicators of the climate change, Glacier lakes are in the risks of the burstings and cascading disaster like annually we are facing the disaster like Melamchi disaster. In this monsoon also we face great disasters. And springs are drying, causing the migrations of the rural populations. So because of this, all things, water managers are in the difficulty. Water management is in critical. And our energy is clean energy and based on the produced by the waters. Energy production is declining because of the less flow in the summer seasons. And because of the disaster and extreme floods, hydraulic structures are getting lost or damaged. In this year, our ministry study in this year, because of the flood, 37 million USD, as per our evaluation, 37 million USD has been lost, has been damaged. And Nepal's NDC targets cover all sectors, especially if we talk about the energy sectors. Our NDC2 target is producing 15,000 megawatt of electricity by 2030. This is the clean energy targets, and which contribute the fossil fuels, contributing the our NDC target of carbon targets. But the achievement is only up to date. 3,100 megawatt has been installed. The progress compared to the baseline is only 1,700 megawatt. Still, we have to produce more than 11,000 megawatts. For this, big investment is required. Conducive policy for the private investors is required. And if we talk about alternative energy, which is also another source of another means of clean energy, our target is 15% of the total energy demand from the clean energy source. Compared to the baseline value was 5%, and the progress is only 4%. So still we have to achieve 6% more. And recently, in this year, for the path to the clean energy, our ministry prepared long-term development plan, energy and renewable potential development roadmap. As per this roadmap, we have installed capacity of 3,200 megawatt, and by 2035, the target is 28,500 megawatt. By the policy and legal and institutional improvements, program setting and project implementation, human resource and financial management. And for this energy demand and supply management, we plan for this physical infrastructure, transmission and distribution programs are also set, and programs related to energy trades. These are the inputs, our plan inputs for achieving 28,500 megawatt by 2035. This is our very ambitious targets for the path of the clean energy. Another policy intervention for the NDC is our irrigation policy and river and water-induced disaster management policy. Just in this year, we prepare and is is in implementations. The irrigation policy emphasized the development of the small to medium storage projects and groundwater development, which is yet to exploit. And the groundwater resources in the Nepal is 8 to 13 billion cubic meter, which is utilized below 20% has been utilized to date. So this is also another source for the adaptations. Similarly, we are facing the extreme events of the floods and landslides. Our new policy promote the utilizations of the local indigenous technology and utilization of the locally available materials. This is our another policy interventions. And we are preparing NDC 3 by 2025, it will be submitted. The implementation challenges. The major, we prepared NDC to, just I mentioned that in terms of the energy and the water resource sector, the achievement is very far below the targets. The major implementation challenges, we are drafting the another NDC. As per our experience, the major implementation challenges is the finance. The cost of the mitigations, adaptations, conditional targets, unconditional targets required very high. And the internal resource is not sufficient to implement the activities mentioned in the NDC. So the international fund, climate fund are necessary, and climate fund is not, the problem is the difficult to access the climate fund, difficulty to access the climate fund. Similarly, we have to improve our institutional efficiency, coordination, internal and external coordination mechanism. We need the technology, we have to enhance the technical capacity, monitoring project implementation and monitoring capacity. These are also some challenges. Similarly, we have to strengthen our policy, governance mechanisms, and in the hydropower sectors, the country is in the very good track of the private sector investment, more conducive environment, and have to create it further. Similarly, because of the topography and remoteness, there is socio-economic and equity challenges, and mitigation and balancing mitigation and adaptation is another challenges. By overcoming these challenges, we can meet our NDC implementation action plan. Shortly, I did my presentations, and the esteemed panelists renowned in the field are here, and I think further they will elaborate. Thank you.
Now I would like to request Dr. Santosh Nepal to come forward and invite all the panelists and continue the panel discussion session.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Santosh Nepal. I work with the International Water Management Institute, IMI. We are based in headquarters in Sri Lanka, but also working in 40 countries in Asia and Africa. And we are an Institute of Research for Development, and we work on creating evidence, policy, and then the water-related solutions. So thank you, Mr. Acharya, for giving a very comprehensive presentations on the NDC status in Nepal in terms of challenges from both climate change and other socio-economic challenges. Now we are moving into the panel discussions, and I'll just give a little bit of context on the panel discussions, which is around the mainstreaming of Nepal's NDC international plan policies, but very importantly, also in the context of there is a huge financing required for implementing the successful NDCs, and the figure was already given, which is in the cost of like 25, and then the unconditional is $3.4 billion. So the context here is also that Nepal is preparing for the next NDC, which we are calling it NDC 3.0, and then the Ministry of Forest and Environment, in coordination with the other ministries, are preparing for this. The first NDC was submitted in 2016, which actually marked Nepal's initial commitments, focusing primarily on the mitigation strategies to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. But the second update on 2020, December, also introduced the incremental improvements, setting more specific targets for renewable energy, electricity, mobility, and then the sustainable agriculture. And the NDC has also defined the both policy-based mitigation target, but also the prioritized for the different sectors. And Nepal, as you know, that has a very little contribution in the greenhouse gas emissions, but has a very vulnerable countries in terms of the impact. And in the recent times, we are facing the impacts more from the weather extremes, and some of the figures were already presented in the presentations. Nepal has also submitted the NDC Implementation Plan that established the measurable activity and policy targets for energy, agriculture, forest, and land use sectors. And Government of Nepal also endorsed and submitted the long-term strategy for the net zero emission LST in October 2021. And then some of the energy targets that you already see, the ambition that we have with the 15,000 megawatt by 2030, and then the forest cover of 45% forest cover by 2030. So in this context, the panel discussions will focus on what are the bottlenecks and challenges of NDC implementation in Nepal, and then what are the opportunities at the same time with the NDC 3.0 that we are preparing, and explore the climate finance and innovative funding finance mechanism to support the NDC implementations. So with this, I would like to introduce the esteemed panelists who will be addressing the key questions around the NDC implementation in Nepal. I will first introduce, as I introduce the panelists, I would like to request the panelists to also join in the front chair. So first we have Dr. Maheshwar Dhakal. Maheshwar Dhakal is a Joint Secretary at the Ministry of Forest and Environment, Government of Nepal. Dr. Dhakal has more than 2 decades of experience in biodiversity conservation and climate actions. Currently, Dr. Dhakal also serves as a board member for the Loss and Damage Fund Board. Next, we have Dr. Madhav Karki. Dr. Karki is an advisor of Honorable Minister for Forest and Environment, Government of Nepal. And Dr. Karki has more than 3 decades of experience in the forest, biodiversity, and mountain conservation. I would like to apologize that I'm just giving a very short version of the introduction of our panelists, but they have, for the sake of timing, but they have a very, the depth of experience in this field. Now, the third panelist we have is the Dr. Vidisha Shamarashekha. And Vidisha, please join the front chair. And Dr. Vidisha is a Strategic Program Director at Water and Climate Change with the International Water Management Institute. And Vidisha has also more than 3 decades of experience in climate change mitigations and climate finance initiatives. Last but not least, we have Mr. Frankie Jamjani, and who is a Deputy Director for Monitoring of Mitigation Action and Director General of Climate Change, Ministry of Environment of Indonesia. And I would like to welcome you all the panelists in the front. So the structure of the panel discussion will be that I'll pose a couple of questions, and then if time permits, then I'll come back to the audience also to pose 1 or 2 questions. So I would like to start with Dr. Dhakal. The mic is over there. Yeah, you have been with the Ministry of Forest and Environment, who is the focal agency for the NDC in coordination with other sectoral ministries. So, and then we have nearly a decade of experience with the NDC. So what are the main challenges of NDC implementation plan in Nepal? And how can Nepal effectively mainstream its NDC into national plans, policies, and then very importantly, the budgetary processes. And then if you can also touch upon towards the end, like particularly for the scope for the water and energy sectors. Over to you, Dr. Takala.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Santos. And first of all, I would like to share my sincere thanks to the organizing agency for giving this opportunity. Basically, the major challenges in NDC implementation in the context of Nepal, like the developing country, the least developed country, definitely resource mobilization is the big challenge. At the same time, being a developing country, the access to the advanced technology is another challenge, because while you are talking about the water resources has multiple benefits in terms of you can take the synergy of both adaptation and mitigation. For example, I would like to share the example of the hydropower. Hydropower is one of the clean energy and huge potentiality in Nepal. But if you go through our NDC, we targeted 15,000 megawatt by 2030. But inside that target, 5,000 is unconditional and remaining 10,000 is conditional. Automatically, you can understand that the financial resource mobilization is the major challenges. But at the same time, Dr. Santos and colleagues, while implementing the NDC, to align the NDC with the national policy and institutional reform is another challenge to the developing countries like Nepal. Then what does it mean? Let me clear about the NDC. I would like to highlight the 4 points. While you are talking about the NDC is the risks and vulnerability in terms of water. Too much water and too little water, and snow-fed river systems in the context of Nepal. Those challenges we have to consider, and the very frequent risk assessment is required. Too much water and too little water, how do you balance it through the NDC plan is there. And second is how do you get the synergy between mitigation and adaptations? Protecting our water resource is a part of adaptation to the local communities. But at the same time, the reservoir and the collection of the rainfall harvesting, or even in the summertime, the water, the huge quantity of water what we receive from the rainfall, we can develop the reservoir and translate into the clean energy. This is the synergy between the mitigation and adaptation. And the third one is, please do not take water and NDC just as a policy document. It is a matter of justice. Still, in our case, in our rural areas, a woman can walk more than 5 hours to collect few liters of water for their daily and basic livelihoods. That's why take it how seriously we have to take the NDC from bottom-up approach, considering to those people who are the most effective, less capacity to cope, and support through NDC plan. And then final challenges is how do you mobilize the international agencies and international funding mechanism through the multilateralism. These are the major challenges, because considering the time limit, I will limit my presentation here. If something else, then I will come later on. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rakal. You made a very important point in terms of achieving the target of clean energy, how important it is to manage the water in terms of too much and too little water is a very important point. But you raise a very important point, but probably I'll ask a follow-up questions later in terms of mobilizing the international funding opportunities. Okay, so now I would like to go to Dr. Madhav Karki. And Madhav Karki, as Nepal prepares for the next iteration of NDC, so what are the lessons that we need to take forward from the two previous NDCs of 2016 and 2020 in terms of the development of the balanced and forward looking climate targets, and how can we make it ambitious yet realistic again, I think, which is again very important in the context of the changing socioeconomic and other landscape. So, and then my second question is why it is critical to focus on water sector to balance both adaptation and mitigation in the next NDC 3.0. Over to you.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer for giving me this opportunity. And good afternoon, everyone. The topic is quite challenging, as you can guess. We heard about the targets which Nepal have, NDC targets, which are ambitious, although majority of them are conditional. So among the targets, we have huge electricity, clean energy target of 15,000 megawatt. But along with that, we also have targets of 30% methane reduction. We also have targets of from CBD from the Convention on Biological Diversity of achieving 30% protected areas and 30% ecosystem restoration. So we have to restore our system. So that means we have to focus on all the sectors. In Nepal, 4 sectors have been prioritized by NDC. The first one is definitely we have what we call the mitigation areas like transportation, industrial processing and production and utilization. But we also have FLO, agriculture, forest, and the land use system. And this is a difficult to avoid sector. This sector has emission coming from agriculture is increasing. So this is the major challenge. And of course, we need our priority is adaptation, but we as the whole world, I think it's has been asked to really raise your ambition on mitigation, but also increase your adaptation activities. Which means that Nepal's third NDC has to be more ambitious. Now, how to achieve that? And we all know that although our NDC Implementation Plan, the required finance is about $36 billion. But right now, Nepal's international financial access is about $300 million. So we have a huge financial, I would say, gap. So in this context, I would like to request that, I would like to share that water-centric adaptation and focused on also watershed and our catchment management, I think would be central to achieve this balanced adaptation and mitigation. Now let me focus. One of the targets which our NDC has is it has to increase the production and productivity of agricultural land. To reduce emission from agriculture, the production has to go up, which means that it's not only based on the, I would say, chemical input, but practicing more agroecological approaches, more regenerative agriculture approaches, more food system based approaches. So which means we need to have sustainable land management, and then we need to have food system transformation, and we need to also have integrated water resource management. Now, as all of you know that Nepal is a mountainous country, and its river basins and watersheds are highly degraded. In fact, our 37% land is degraded. So which means that if Nepal is targeting to achieve energy transition by producing hydro energy, and it's also targeting at the same time to achieve food, water and energy, food and water security, then it has to practice It has to practice integrated and mainstreamed, I would say, water management, climate management, and our NDC has to reflect that. So my recommendation would be that our third NDC has to be much more ambitious. While we will still have a lot of conditional targets in NDC, but we have to also make our domestic activities more efficient. What do I mean by efficient? As all of you know that globally now the best approach to manage climate risk and climate challenges is whole of society, whole of government approach, which means that all the ministries, especially those which are directly impacted by climate change, they have to work together. So this working together means more, I would say, the vertical and horizontal coordination. In Nepal, we have three-layer government, and right now I think the coordination among three layers is not ideal. So this one, I think we need to increase this what we call whole of government approach and then whole of society approach. Yeah. The climate change challenge cannot be met only by the efforts of the government. The private sector and also the civil society and then the society as a whole, they have to also contribute. Thank you. For that, I would say that first of all, to manage water, we have to have this integrated river basin management, the water resource policy of, I think, 2020, which Ministry of Energy, Water Resources has released, provides very enabling environment for conducting integrated river basin and integrated water resource management. And Nepal also has, the Ministry of Forest and Environment has approved a strategy and action plan to have integrated large river basin and watershed management.
Thank you.
So that has to be implemented. So what it will do is that if we have water security, if we have water, I would say the shortages are addressed. We have enough water for domestic use, for industrial use, and also for our health and sanitary use. Then we can have adaptation.
Thank you. Thank you.
For mitigation, I would like to say that sustainable land management means that you have to have forest restoration, you have to have ecosystem restoration, so your adaptation will have large mitigation co-benefits. So having this co-benefit in both adaptation and mitigation activities, I think our NDCs can be more ambitious. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kaki. You raised a very, I think I really like the narrations that you have said, like NDC is not only about the mitigation, it is also about adaptations, but then you also brought these very important aspects of holistic management of resources of water, because without managing water and then also linking it to the sustainable land management and then the society approach, probably we cannot fully achieve the NDC target goals. I'll come up with the follow-up questions for that. I'll come back again. Now I would like to go to our third panelist, Frankie Jamjani from Indonesia, and thank you, Mr. Jamjani, for accepting our offer in last moment yesterday to be a panelist, because we want to really hear the experience from the other countries as well. Indonesia, when I quickly look at the NDC, you have submitted the updated NDC in 2022. The updated NDC has an unconditional emission reduction target of 32%, conditional, which is 42%, and you have also embarked on the mixed energy use policy. So can you please share about your experience from the Indonesia regarding how renewable energy and water resources are reflected in the updated NDC? And you heard about the Nepalese context. If you can also link, what are the promising things, if you can also suggest for Nepal. Over to you, Mr. Jamjani.
Thank you. First of all, I will thank you to organizer and Nepal government, and also surely NDC Partnership Pavilion. And Indonesia is a country that is vulnerable to the adverse impact of climate change. and has significant potential contribution to the global greenhouse gas emission reduction, is fully committed to reduce GHG emission and enhance climate resilience, aligned with the goal of the Paris Agreement to limit temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius that would significantly reduce the risk and impacts of climate change. In order to reduce vulnerability and enhance resilience, of course, Indonesia has increased adaptation ambition with more elaborated action. As the largest maritime country, Indonesia has included ocean as part of adaptation action and initiated efforts to include ocean as part of mitigation in future NDC. And regarding to the question, Indonesia has made strong commitment to mitigate the climate change by setting up enhanced national determined contribution to reduce the 31.89% of emission unconditional or 43.2% conditional by 2030. Through our enhanced NDC, Indonesia sets a higher ambition, achieve our carbon emission reduction target from the energy sector, which is set at 358 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2030. And Indonesia has abundant resources and a diversity of new renewable energy sources with a total potential of 3,600 gigawatt, consisting of solar, hydro, wind, bioenergy, geothermal, and marine energy. Currently, Indonesia is progressing in developing renewable energy sources as the foundation of our decarbonization strategy. Currently, the installed capacity of the new renewable energy power plant reached 13.7 gigawatts with a mix of new renewable energy to the national primary energy supply of 13.3%. And this capacity is a commendable 2% increase, adding over 280 megawatts since last year. Our journey is far from over, and to truly unlock our abundant new renewable energy resources, we must accelerate our efforts. The draft NDC 3.0 emphasized renewable energy as a cornerstone for decarbonization. Targeting is implementation across power, industrial, transportation, household, and building sectors. Renewable energy development is a critical aspect of supporting the power sector by implementing renewable energy such as geothermal, hydro, solar, wind, bioenergy, biomass, and other renewable energy. It is also critical to implement biofuel and solar PV in end-use sector. In the context of NDC implementation, water supply availability is integral to support the renewable energy generation, both as the primary source of hydropower as well as irrigation system in bioenergy development. Apart from supporting the energy sector mitigation efforts, water resources are also prominent in the context of climate adaptation, including water-related risks such as floods and droughts, which are prevalent to promote resiliency and security of our energy system and infrastructures. Integrated assessment of climate energy water system nexus might be important to ensure synergy between water management and energy development. Nepal can draw valuable lesson from Indonesia by I think diversifying its renewable energy mix, strengthening policies to attract investment, and achieving climate actions, especially in renewable energy, leveraging its own renewable resources while expanding into hydro, solar, and wind can also enhance Nepal energy security and resilience.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Zamzani. You very importantly highlighted the mixed energy policy and diversifying the energy policy, and then the policy to attract the investment for the effective implementation of the NDC. Now I would like to go our fourth panelist, Dr. Vidisha. Vidisha, you have been working on water sector for so long. So my question is like, why is it important to bring the water and adaptation aspects into the NDC, the updated NDC? And what can Nepal learn from other countries? If you know any, the promising practices from the other countries in terms of innovation and in terms of financing, could you please share your experience here?
Sure, thank you very much. Naughty chap who's chairing this is telling you all that I've got 30 years of experience, and it's making me a very, very old lady on this panel here. So look, first of all, I'm very, very thrilled to be here. As Santosh knows very well, I had the privilege of serving in Nepal for 4 years. And so I know only too very well the impacts of water as it affects Nepal. During my time there, and I think this partly answers also, Santosh, your question, I always advocated for water not to be seen as a sector. Water is a connector, right? Water can bring you great benefits, it can also harm you. When we look at the NDCs and the opportunity that you have to update your commitments, if you can make that switch of looking at integration of water across all of the sectors that are covered in your NDC, you've got agriculture, you've got environment, you've got energy. See water as your tool to connect and integrate, and therefore bring your ambition, your climate ambition up. There are many examples of the importance of water as a climate change adaptation, as well as a mitigation approach. I would advocate very strongly for Nepal to be looking at the opportunity of integration, which brings you to the point where you're addressing many of the obstacles and barriers that you have with regard to the way institutions in country work. So look for opportunities to work together and focus less on that which doesn't enable you to. Look at forcing that integration through water, to look at how you can work, for example, Ministry of Water Resources with the climate and Ministry of Climate and Environment. A really important diagnostic tool that Nepal was part of was the Water Resilience Tracker. This was launched as part of UK government's contribution. It's the Just Transition for Water Security Programme. Water Resilience Tracker is one component of that. Nepal had the advantage of having been tested, piloted for the first phase of the water tracker. So already you've made some progress towards looking at that integration. You would greatly benefit from being part of a phase 2 of the rollout of the Water Resilience Tracker, and especially as it enables you to meet your new NDC 3.0. This National Climate Plan is really, really important for you. It's also an important engagement for you also to look at how you can really work across different agencies with a common goal of ambition. I'm often asked, and we're often asked this, Santosh and Imi, can you cite an example of a strong NDC? What's a model NDC? I would say that there isn't. Various NDCs from different countries are good on certain aspects, but I'm yet to see one which is looking at water as a connector. And I think that is where Nepal could really achieve some great traction based on what it's already done as piloting the water resilience tracker, and in its new version, really look at that connection which will enable you to build programs of work and projects which are robust and which will also enable you to access climate finance. So really look at how you can, these are, it's easy. We've got words here coming from a group of panelists. But you have already all the makings from having gone through that first phase of the water tracker. So I think in terms of my contribution, please, please, please look at being part of the water tracker. Look at water as a connector, not as a sector. Advocate for a climate ambition through water as your connector to ensure that you can really meet your NDC ambitions and goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Vidisha. I think you made a very strong narration that see water as a connector, not as a sector, because all other sectors depends on water for their, the optimal performance. And then thanks for also sharing about the water tracker. And I understand that the Water and Energy Commission Secretariat also is the focal institute for the water tracker. Okay, I have one question that I really want to ask as a follow-up questions to Dr. Dhakal. You mentioned about the need of institutional reform in for the effective NDC implementations. By looking at the figure, I think the Dr. Karki also mentioned, and also in the presentations, what we are talking here for the NDC, what we are asking as a climate finance is something like 30 billion US dollars for the 10 years of window period, which comes like a 3 billion US dollars, annual basis. So for that kind of funding, and then I think Dr. Karki also mentioned the current, what we are handling is, if I'm not hurt, the 30 million per year. So what do you think that what sort of institutional reform is required, and particularly in the federal context that we have the federal government, provincial government, local governments, what sort of institutional reform is required for the effective NDC implementation?
Thank you, Santosh. I think in my opinion, if you look the resources either at national level or international levels, at national level, of course, the national resources comes from the national treasury systems, right? But at the same time, we do have some private sectors over there for the hydropower, you can see very easily. But on the other hand, the international agencies, particularly different type of funds mechanism, either Green Climate Fund or JEF or Adaptation Fund or Loss and Damage Fund, where I'm working at this moment. For me, for the NDC, in the beginning, we have to see, if you are looking NDC from the mitigation perspective, then you have to go the decarbonization path. And you have to find the more productive sectors and where you can accommodate the private sectors to include them. And then you can welcome also the international community. Because basically, being a developing country, we are always asking for grant, concessionary loan, right? Then we have to find and leverage the international communities, even bilateral or even multilateral development bank. What type of strategy you are going to take up? That's the very important. Blanket approach so far we applied, which is totally ridiculous at this moment. That's why we have to think more digitally, and we have to develop our strategy separately. Multilateral development bank, one strategy. Existing fund, one strategy. Bilateral and multilateral, one strategy, and international multinational company is another strategy. This is my point, that we have to generate the maximum funding for the NDC. But on the other hand, I fully agree that water do not take as a sector, but as a connector. If you see Nepal, we do have 45% of the forest ecosystems, food security, even health security, and then energy. All those things we have to capitalize. And even I do not like to focus from the adaptation part. Let's encourage the local government and provincial government to align their national activities, annual activities with the existing government policies. But particularly your questions, please do not think that reforming institutions to implement the NDC, I am not thinking creating new institutions, just first review the existing institutions where there is a gap and let's reform them. And if needed additional agencies, then we can think. But at least let's review and move forward. This is my very short suggestion. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Dhakal. And I'm just quickly, I always feel that we should give a space for the audience also to ask questions. But looking at the time, I can take one or two questions with the first round and second. Okay, Frozen, first question, seconds, and then the other questions I would encourage you to discuss with the panelists after the sessions, because we have to vacate this room after some time. Okay, here, yeah, and then later.
I'm Sagar Aryal. I work as CTO at Plan for the Planet Foundation out of Germany. I also lived many years in Nepal. And yes, in the past, youth inclusion in this process relied on consultations led by youth, and it's not institutionalized. And my question is, how will youth inclusion be different this time in the preparation? And is there any plans to institutionalize meaningful youth engagement?
Thank you. I'll take another question from here. Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, hi. So I just had a question about the implementation of the National Adaptation Plan and the shoring up of resources, specifically funds for it. So it's about like 10 odd billion dollars more than the mitigation plan. And how much of that is conditional and how much of that is unconditional? And what is the community of stakeholders in Nepal, specifically the Nepali government, doing to access funds in order to access NCQG funds and the quantum in order to implement the adaptation plan? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will request to address the questions, but at the same time, I'm also, if you are addressing the questions, please address. And then for other panelists, I would like to request to wrap up your statement, saying that since we have this, the big gathering in COP29, what are the one things that you expect from this COP in terms of the effective implementation of the NDCs for the least developed countries like Nepal? So I'll go from the Dr. Dhakal. Would you like to answer some questions, address? Otherwise,
particularly, the first question is mobilization of youth, right? You asked?
Inclusion, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Inclusion, yeah.
Institutionalizing meaningful youth engagement.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Even still, I remember that while designing the second NDC, I was the coordinator. And how do we include all the segment of the society, as Dr. Karki said, whole of the society and whole of the government? Because inclusion means you cannot reach to each and every individual to ask the target. That's why always policy document should be representative and the average document always. And normally we invited all the stakeholders, including civil society, media colleagues, youth, and local government, provincial government, and we organized the different workshops and seminars, and we collected their views, their suggestions, and then expert group analyzed their suggestions in the center. And as much as possible and as long as possible, we try to the advance NDC with ambitious NDC that NDC can touch upon every individual. That's the way what we are applying. But basically in third generation NDC, we would like to make more inclusive in terms of, as I said, the rural women has to move more than 5 kilometers, 5 hours walking distance to collect some liter of water for their daily livelihoods. Then how do we can make more inclusive? We are under discussions. Definitely, I would like to address your essence, your value of your questions. I fully understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Dhakal. Dr. Karki, would you like to address the question?
Very quickly, I would like to answer this the question which Ruby has asked. So how to enhance or improve access of funds for civil society and for other stakeholders. While the country itself is asking for, more accessible, available, and adequate finance, whatever finance the country gets definitely has to be accessible by all the stakeholders, because we are talking about whole of society approach. So I think for that, Nepal, unlike I would say other neighboring country, has very few direct access entities. So we have to have direct access entities in civil society sector also, and they will then increase the access. There are other measures, capacity building and awareness raising about the financial institutions and how funding can be accessible. So this capacity building will be needed throughout the process. My takeaway from this, or my expectation from this COP is that while this COP has been, a sort of touted as a finance COP, so whatever finance is agreed by this COP, I think there should be more finance for adaptation, which will be then, which will enable Nepal to have more water-centric or water, I would say, connecting food, water, energy nexus approach in adaptation. And then I would also like to see that they should not disappoint the huge expectation that funds should also be coming for loss and damage. Because countries like Nepal, we already have suffered losses and damages. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Karki. Vidisha, one thing that you expect from this COP for the effective implementation?
I'm going to keep it very short and sweet. You've got a lovely statement there from the Executive Secretary, Simon Steele. This new round of national climate plans will be amongst the most important policy documents produced so far this century. If we can take anything away from this COP, is to use that NDC to meet the ambitions that you need in country in Nepal. Look at water as a connector, not as a separate sector. The climate finance money will flow if you get your NDC right. Thank you.
Thank you, Vidisha. Mr. Zamzani, if you want to, do you want to address like what one thing that you expect from this COP? Closing.
Okay. We propose the following programs: building ownership and commitment among ministries, capacity building to enhance capacity of institution and human resources, creating enabling environment to engage wider stakeholders, developing framework and network for coordination, developing policies, planning, intervention program for NDC. And NDC implementation refers to implementation of policies, planning and intervention programs. And lastly, monitoring and review of NDC to track progress.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Zamzani. And give them a huge round of applause for our excellent panelists. Thank you so much. And I would like to, and thank you so much. Yeah. We have, just a second, we have a closing remarks. I would like to request everyone to please be seated. We have a closing remarks here.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Santos and the panelists for your contribution. I would like to request Mr. Dio Cabinet to have few words on from the side of NDC Secretariat.
Oh, all right. Sorry. All right. Sorry. This won't take long, and I just wanted to, of course, thank our distinguished colleagues, partners, and panel speakers who have been kindly, presented their voices and their insights in terms of how Nepal would be able to mainstream their climate ambition with their national policies, plans, and regulation and other budgeting processes. And it's great to also hear from Pa Frankie, who also shared his insights from their experiences in Indonesia, which we often looked up for as one of those good practice out there. So it's a privilege, of course, to close this discussion on mainstreaming Nepal's NDC into national plans, policies, and budgets, and also in terms of exploring opportunities for the next generation of the NDCs. And of course, I'd like to thank the government of Nepal for their leadership in advancing this very critical work. This is something that we've been trying to advocate in the NDC Partnership since the beginning, since the inception of the NDC Partnership. And this is the reason why in all of our member countries, we always request for two focal points. One, from the Climate Change Agency, and second, from the Ministries of Finance, Budgeting, Planning, or Economic Development. And this is the reason for that. And we're glad to see that Nepal is now leading as an example, as another example for integrating climate action in development processes, ensuring that climate priorities are reflected in national strategies, budgeting frameworks, and that the active engagement of ministries and finance, as well as implementing, like MoEWRI, for example, and planning agencies, is deemed critical in aligning climate ambition with national economic and development priorities, and especially in terms of unlocking resources and building capacities within those other institutions, not just to understand what climate change is, but actually internalize climate change into their operations and articulate it within their own mandates. Because it's nice to have an ambition, but it's not articulated within those development plans and not budgeted and not being bought in and led by the ministers. It's a nice ambition. As Nepal prepares for their NDC 2.0, there's an exciting opportunity for us to harness that vast water resources, as Madam has been trying to really advocate very strongly, and sustainable water management practices that they've had vast experiences. Similarly, scaling renewable energy and including hydropower clean energy solutions would be one of those driving forces for low carbon development that definitely that the country could explore, not just for mitigation, but much definitely for energy security and access. And by integrating these opportunities with NDCs and aligning them with sectoral economic policies, Nepal can further strengthen your resilience and achieve development co-benefits across different sectors. Nepal's commitment on whole of government approach, collaboration, especially the leadership of the Ministry of Forestry and Environment, I may be misspeaking, and as well as, of course, our colleagues from the Ministry of Energy, Water Resources and Irrigation, serves as a model for effective implementation. And us from the NDC Partnership stands ready to support your efforts to align climate, water, energy, and economic goals for a sustainable and low-carbon future. So again, thank you for inspiring us to act boldly and collaboratively, and indeed, together, we can achieve more. Thank you so much.